But we're going to start with Nolan's interview with former Congressman John Dingell. He has a new book out this week, and he talks about his roots, his legacy, and how politics defined his life.
Fascinating. You spend a lot of time in this book talking about your family's history in America, and I was surprised to learn that you are the skin of Polish immigrants who came here in the 19th century, ended up in Texas to work in the agriculture business there.
It was a poor family. They actually made several trips over to bring all of their folks into the United States.
Mm-hmm. I won't even try, John, to pronounce the original family name.
Well, it's not that hard. It's Dingellevich.
Dingellevich.
Yeah, what it means is it means blacksmith.
Your grandfather was a blacksmith when he came to this country and was trying to make a living selling watermelons, and he'd had about enough of that there in Texas.
So he was trying to sell them for a nickel a piece, and he couldn't sell them. So he just dumped them in the side of the road in a ditch, put the family all in the wagon, and they headed all north, and they kept going and going.
Your dad's family came here. Your dad grew up here, basically came up from the streets, ended up as a printer at the Detroit Free Press, came down with a very terrible disease. They called it consumption then. It's tuberculosis today. Went to Colorado to recuperate, got his start in politics out there, but then came back to the Detroit, ended up in the Congress, and spent 20 years there.
He was a guy who actually led the country, and Social Security, most of the titles.
He was a New Dealer, right?
New Deal, and he brought that into being.
But you grew up in the House, John. You started as a page in the Congress when you were 11 years old.
Yes.
When you were 15, you were in the House chambers the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Franklin Roosevelt stood up before the Congress and gave his Day of Infamy speech.
Yes, he did.
You remember that like it was yesterday.
I do, because everybody knew that it was something very important to the future history of the world.
You got the call when you were 29 years old that your father had died while serving in Congress. You entered the Congress right at the height of the civil rights struggle. And what you say in this book, the vote you're most proud of in Congress was your vote in favor of the Civil Rights Act. But it wasn't a popular vote here in your district.
It was a very unpopular vote. It was a hard vote. It was not easy. And it was a vote which was difficult because the people, truthfully, didn't want it. There were all manner of lies told about it and what it meant.
One of the distinguishing features of your career is that you were also one of the most powerful voices for the Second Amendment during your time in Congress. You were a board member of the NRA and a very proud and active member for a number of years until you resigned. We are still struggling with what to do about gun laws in this country. What's the answer there, John?
We don't know, and we may not know anytime soon. But the fact of the matter is, this is something that has to be addressed by and for the people so that we can live together as brothers and sisters and as fellow Americans. And one of the roots of it is seeing to it that we protect mental health, because without mental health, we can't protect the people of the country.
You were replaced in Congress by your wife, Debbie Dingell, who ran for your seat. How's she doing?
I am very proud. I am one who believes that she is a better congressman than her husband was.
And does she seek your counsel?
Once in a while, yes. And once in a while, she rejects it.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell.
And once in a while, she does what she damn pleases, which is usually the way it should be.
Obviously, anyone who reads this book understands the very close bond between you and your father. John, one of the things your father was very focused on was universal health care. And you introduced his bill at every His bill didn't get passed while he was in Congress, but you reintroduced it at the start of every new congressional term while you were in Congress.
And we're going to sign this bill.
A version of it finally passed with the Affordable Care Act under President Barack Obama. What was that moment like for you? You were the presiding officer that day of the House and sat beside the president as he signed the bill. What was that moment like for you?
Great satisfaction. We had done our duty, we had served the people, we had worked with the president, we had carried out our constitutional functions, and we had been truthful to the people that we owed everything to.
We are done.
It was a time of great urgency, and it was something that was of desperate importance to all Americans.
In your mind, has it worked?
It's had terrible opposition, but the answer is yes. I walk into the hospital and they say, "Thank you, Mr. Dingell." And I say, "Why?" They say, "For the bill." They say, because that bill is something which has made it possible for my wife or me or my kids to live. That's damn important, Nolan.
I've heard you say a number of times, John, that your goal was to make your father proud by who you've become and your service in the House. Do you believe you've accomplished that goal?
I think history will tell us better than we can say. But the answer is yes, I do. And I think that it will show us more and more as time passes. Now, is anybody going to remember the name Dingell? Probably not. But they will remember how to do these things and to return the country to the ground that it should be on, so that it can do that which it should do, to serve the people for whom we take oath and say, I will support and defend the Constitution.
Well, that was a tremendous conversation. Let's bring in Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of WDET. Hi, guys. Gosh, Nolan, I have to ask you, I know actually both of you have a very unique relationship with John Dingell, and you are very good friends, which I think some people really wouldn't realize because of where you stand on the political spectrum.
But you have to remember, John Dingell is out of a different era in that regard. He was also a very, very close friend of George H.W. Bush, a Republican conservative. He wrote, George H.W. wrote the foreword to this book, and we should mention the name. It's called The Dean, the Best Seat in the House.
Yeah.
It's biography, political commentary. It's really a good read. But, John and I have hunted together. We spend a lot of time talking. We rarely get into angry political discussions, although we have been heated at times. We just, we like each other, we respect each other.
But coming from that point of respect and friendship and having the politics still around you, how did you prepare to sit down and talk to him to bring out a lot of the things that you did in this interview?
Well, I read the book, but I also, I've had these conversations. One of my favorite things to do is to stop by and just listen to John tell stories. And, I've heard all these stories before, so I had a pretty good idea of what he wanted to talk about. But also, when I read the book, there were stories I hadn't heard, and the early roots of his family in the country was really fascinating. It's really truly an American story, the way they came over here as dirt poor immigrants and just scratched and clawed their way, ended up in the Congress. Now, father and son in the Congress just 2 generations after they came to America.
It's really amazing, and you speak to his legacy and the kind of governing that he was a part of, and I feel that we are talking about what makes a good lawmaker now, and the dignity of it, and the thoughtfulness. Have we lost some of that, or are we just in a different time and with different people, different generations?
So today also in the Atlantic, John Dingell has an extended commentary piece where he's talking about the things that he thinks we need to do to change government, to be more representative of the people. They're ideas that you would not hear from anybody among the 535 people who are in Washington right now. I mean, he's talking about
Not all great ideas.
well, I think some of them are
Ideas
pretty good.
nonetheless, eh?
I like most of them. You know, he talks about public financing of campaigns. He talks about abolishing the Senate, which he said has outlived its usefulness. You know, trying to make sure that smaller states get representation. Now they have too much representation, way more than people in populous states. But it's that kind of thoughtfulness that I think has always marked John's mind and his approach to governing, and it is something that we are really missing in Washington right now.
How do we get that back, or how do we, I guess, morph ourselves to the time that we're representing now?
I mean, he started from a different place. He started with a goal of, this is what I want to accomplish. This is a bill I want to pass. Now, how do I get it passed? Rather than, gosh, how do I score a political victory with this piece of legislation? You think about it, he worked with Richard Nixon on the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act. He worked across the aisle on a number of very important bills for this country, both particularly when he was Commerce Secretary. They got a lot of things done with Republican presidents because he started with the idea of, this is what we need to do. Now, the bills always didn't finish the way he started them, but he got something important passed.
It's interesting, my John Dingell story is the first time I met him. He was always the congressman who would write you a thank you note for the opportunity of being able to speak with you about a story you were doing. So as a reporter, you'd get the letter from John Dingell.
But that's also a generational thing. We were talking the other night about future historians. You see historians looking at George H.W. Bush's trove of letters that he's written to people. What will future historians have? Because these emails and text messages.
It's a
but they are saving tweets, and John Dingell has already he's migrated there as well.
Tweets,
and so,
but there's something really fundamentally different about that instant thought that you put into a few characters, and something that you take the time to sit down and write. I've actually talked with Doris Kearns Goodwin about her concerns about future historians not being able. I mean, she relies so heavily on the written record for presidents in particular.
That's right.
What are people 30, 50 years going to do?
When's the last time you wrote a letter?
oh gosh, it's been a while.
Yeah,
Don't
it's been
put
a
me
long
on the
time
spot
for
like
me.
that. Well, we have more of your interview online. He talks about how he feels about Donald Trump.
He talks a lot about that in the book, too.
The book. So you'll be able to we'll be able to see that.